is we're going to continue on with the subframe. We're going to get our Wilwood brakes put on, and we'll just go over just a little bit of the parts that come in the kit. Obviously, we're going to start with the hub. It is drilled for 2 different size hubs, so mine's obviously a Chevy, so I'm gonna put the 12-point lug nuts that comes with, or lug bolts, I should say, in the right holes. Yeah, I guess the other one's probably a Ford, but I'm not using those. So anyway, once you get those lug nuts put in there, this hat goes on here like this. You have these bolts. They get Loctite. To mounting the disc brake to my Ridetech spindle. So on these, because I'm not using the stock spindles, there's total different instructions for that. Use this bolt that's a little longer, comes with 2, but if you're not using the stock spindles, you got to use this longer one, and it mounts in here with this spacer, and then it screws into here. So we're not going to torque this down. We're not going to use the Loctite yet. What we're going to do is we're going to get this in here, and then we're going to get the bottom one in, and then we have to get the spacing just right. It goes in that spacer. Then on the bottom, we have a bolt and a washer, and they give you a whole bunch of spacers for it too, so you can make sure you get your spacing just right. So I've already kind of looked at it a little bit. To mount this flat, it won't work. It's got to be very square on this. So looks like we might need about 3 shims. So I have 3 shims in here. They've got plenty in the kit. I'm going to start with 3 and let's see if it'll make this nice and even. Obviously I am not going to put Loctite or anything on this till it's pretty flat. So we're going to give this a try, get everything tight, take it back apart, Loctite everything, get it put in a little bit more permanent. So if you can see that, as flat as it's going to get, it's definitely squared up right there. So 3 spacers on my Ridetech spindles. I don't know what those are going to take. I had already put this together with 2 and I knew it wasn't going to work. So the spacer with 3 shims down at the bottom makes this bit perfect on here. So now I'm going to take it all apart, Loctite it, torque it to the right specs, and then we'll get the spindle put on after that. So once I have this, I didn't Loctite this yet. Once I have this where I think it's square, the next thing they want you to do is put this on the spindle just to make sure it's square, there's nothing hitting. I do not have the front bearing in yet, just the rear bearing. So we'll get that in there, get it flat, and yeah, everything squares up and looks really good right there. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and pull this apart, get some red Loctite on it. And this top bolt gets 125 foot-pounds of torque, and the bottom gets 85. So we're going to go ahead and Loctite, get everything torqued down, and then we'll finish putting on the hub. So the next thing we're going to do, we've got everything on here torqued down, Loctited, hubs built. So we're going to grease the small hub, get it put on. Comes with these really thick washers. for the hubs. So we'll get those put on. Cause to use your stock castle nut, but my Ridetech spindles came with these, so we use the Ridetech ones. And we'll get that adjusted, and we'll get a cotter pin in there and reinstall these. Then we'll go over adjusting these to center on the disc. So something I just learned that I'll share with you. So here's the Ridetech washer for your bearings. Okay, so this thing, when it screws in, goes around this. That's why it's small. So over here, I did this side with the washer that the Ridetech spindles came with. So if I tighten this, it doesn't let the bearings move. It holds it back. So, needless to say, these are designed so you can use these caps. So I'm gonna pull that apart and put this right cap in there. So let's work on getting our calipers together. So they come unfinished, there's nothing in them. They're 6 pistons, very lightweight aluminum. So what it tells us to do is to start off, obviously there are 2 bolts, and then they get these 2 washers here, and then we have a whole pile of shims, and it says to start out with 2 shims on each bolt. Then we can work on centering. Let me just get this turned. Then we work on centering on the disc. So we'll get started on that. I'm gonna go ahead and follow the instructions. I'm gonna start with 2 shims. The only thing the instructions do say is the bolt shouldn't protrude out of the back of this, should sit flush, and shouldn't sit too far in this. So that's something we gotta look out for with shims, is we don't shim it too much and lose our threads for our calipers. So measured, trial fit, 2 shims. It was a little off. I went to 3 shims. That looks like right, perfect. Just a little advice. It's a pain to get those shims inside of this as you put in here. What I ended up doing is taking a little glob of grease and putting those shims together, and I was able to hold them all in place while I put the bolt through. I had read that somewhere a long time ago. I don't even know where. I've never even used it before, but I tried it without the grease. It is a pain. So try to grease those shims a little bit, and they tend to stay together when you're putting them on those bolts. So anyway, I'll tighten this up, and we'll be putting the pads on next. Pretty easy. There's a little lock in here. You pull out a pair of needle nose. These slide out, and then the brake pads go in. So pretty easy. They look really good. Hopefully they work as well as they look. So we'll move on to the DSC